Clump, clump. There's usually a loud noise as I walk. I have had hypertrophy, or one leg being longer than the other, since I was a small child. My leg length disparity required correction, so I was always had to wear a heavy orthotic device. I was the last student to change classes at school, so my mother had to drop me down and pick me up every time rather than strolling with friends. I was unable to join in, despite the fact that everyone else looked to be having a great time. I can't even begin to count how many times I've gritted my teeth in frustration. Thankfully, the procedure proceeded smoothly, and I was able to return the gadget to middle school. However, I remained reclusive until I was an adult because of the bullying I had in elementary school. I was a horrible public speaker and lacked self-confidence. But I reached a turning point. It surprised me that I was put in charge of the sales division because I was the kind of guy who was constantly anxious and had terrible public speaking skills. I eventually grew to like talking to people and started to feel more confident in myself with the support of my more experienced coworkers. Then one day, I got an invitation to a reunion of my primary school. I made the decision to go since I was feeling better. I informed the organizer via email that I would be attending. My name is Kevin. I am a 27-year-old employee of an IT company. I relocated to New York from my hometown and haven't visited my hometown in a long time. Unusually for me, I even bought new clothes for this reunion in my hometown because I was so excited about it. I wanted to show everyone how much I'd changed, even though I knew it was simply dumb pride. I knew that this feeling was probably a remnant of my past inferiority complex. However, wanting to surprise everyone was a huge step forward for me and an indication of my developing confidence. With renewed vigor, I returned to my hometown on the day of the reunion. My hometown was alive with activity, especially at night, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Was it always this animated? I was a little taken aback by how much the town had evolved. As I made my way toward the reunion place, I periodically looked up the address on my phone. As I walked into the bar, the site, I saw that it was already packed with my former classmates. I knew these people only from school, even though they were all my classmates. My last encounter with them was more than 10 years ago. Even my own recollections were hazy, yet a few people appeared to be recognizable. Is that who that is? Is that possible? Just as I was getting through, I felt a sudden tap on my shoulder from behind. Are you correct, Kevin? Long time. No see. You moved to New York, I've heard. How are you doing? Everyone looked around as if that was a signal, and before I knew it, I was encircled. Some had gained weight, some had gotten taller, and some were even starting to worry about thinning hair. Some were unrecognizable without glasses. There was warmth and nostalgia on every face. Nobody made fun of me. As a matter of fact, the majority of the folks I spoke with were kind and encouraging, even if they were merely flattering. They claimed that I cheered up and changed completely. Some even thought I looked cool and called me gorgeous. All of the compliments were quite flattering, but the last one seemed like a throwback to when people were dubbed nerds and introverted. However, I was doing fine and had become friendly with everyone. I think it was the experiences and self-assurance I picked up at work. Though I tried not to show it, I was genuinely giddy with joy. It wasn't only the boys, of course. I think part of the reason I felt so fantastic was that even the girls began to perceive me differently. I used to be quiet in class and keep a low profile when I was in primary school. I therefore felt as though I was in a dream because there were so many girls around. Since getting to the location, I have found myself thinking, I wish I could show this to my younger self multiple times. I was glad to see familiar acquaintances again and had a pint of beer in my hand. But to be really honest, there was one female in particular that I really wanted to see at this reunion. Ashley was her name. The belle of our class was Ashley. She was an extremely attractive girl, almost like someone you'd see on TV, with her big eyes and smooth hair. She was also kind, collected, and impartial toward all. I thought about her a lot when I was in school. I had no friends, therefore she was the only one who came to chat to me and showed that she cared about me. Because of her generosity, I was able to avoid being a chronic absentee from school, and over time, the bullying I experienced decreased. She was practically a lifesaver to me. I decided to pay Ashley another visit so I could repay her kindness. I glanced around nonchalantly, looking for her everywhere. Amidst the excitement and the shouts of women saying, "What have you been up to?" In long time, no see. Ashley was called out by someone. I quickly turned around and saw a woman in a navy dress standing among some females, her graceful back turned toward me. Based on the recognizable outline, I assumed it had to be Ashley. She had a very unique aura from the rest, even when viewed from behind. I took a deep breath and hesitated before approaching and talking to her. Abruptly, she spun around and flipped her hair. Ashley was the one, without a doubt. Her looks were still youthful, but if anything, she had become an even more elegant and stunning woman. What about Kevin? Ashley. Long time, no see. I approached Ashley and got up in front of her. However, I was uneasy when I was in front of her. I could see burn marks running down her neck from her face, but they were concealed by her hair. They reached out and grasped a glass of wine from her, severely tarnishing her formerly flawless beauty. Since our last encounter, she must have been involved in an accident of some kind. I produced a wide smile, hoping Ashley wouldn't notice and trying not to stare at her scars. With a gentle reply, Ashley said, "It's been a while. How are you doing?" She was obviously aware of what other people thought of her physical appearance, but it was impressive how she chose to ignore the inquisitive looks. I had fallen in love with Ashley then, and she remained the same. It's unbelievable that she showed up at the reunion with that appearance. She has a monstrous appearance. Should I be her, I could not stand it. I heard vicious murmurs coming from behind me. I turned to see a few girls making barely audible remarks about Ashley. Ashley listened to them and remained cool-headed. I think she was used to this kind of thing. I was astounded by the girls' cruelty. Back then, they were good friends of hers. Ashley had changed, but did that make them feel satisfied? I felt a twinge of pain and a building rage. How are you able to utter such dirty things? It doesn't seem like Ashley has done anything wrong. Please don't belittle my fiancé. Out of a protective instinct, I said something ridiculous like, "my fiancé." Was there not a more appropriate way to put it? Though sorry, it was already too late. Now, there was no going back. What? You weren't even in our conversation. Could you please just leave us alone? With a contemptuous reply, the females moved on, vanishing like the tide. Ashley gave me an inexplicable look as she seemed relieved to see them go, but also contrite for bothering me. She had an embarrassed, irritated, and depressed look. This was not how I wanted to see her. Ashley said in a quiet voice that only she could hear, "Let's go outside and get some fresh air." It seemed like a smart concept to me. Silently nodding, we both slipped out of sight of the reunion. The full moon appeared taller and more exquisite than normal when it was outside the bar and beneath the chilly winter sky. We located a park close by and took a seat on a bench. An occasional chilly air drifted in. I quickly located a vending machine and purchased 2 hot beverages. Ashley hadn't spoken anything since we got out of the pub. I happily offered her a drink, hoping to lighten her melancholy. "Here, would you like some warm coffee or cocoa?" After expressing her gratitude, she picked out a coffee can and held it in her hands to reheat it without cracking it. I apologize about the earlier. I overreached myself. I impulsively called you my fiancé because I just wanted to stop talking to them. I had no idea why I had called you that. Maybe I was more inebriated than I realized since I was in a strange place. I was perplexed when Ashley eventually looked up. "Kevin, you truly caught me off guard. We've been apart for more than 10 years, and now we're engaged. However, I was glad that you stood up for me against the betrayal. Ashley grinned broadly and replied, "Thank you, genuinely." Instead of reprimanding me, as I had anticipated, she thanked me and grinned broadly. Her compassion was exactly the same as it was in elementary school. Always happy, thoughtful, and not taking anything personally, which left me even more perplexed. I was encouraged by her unwavering strength and curiosity in her whereabouts. Ashley, sensing my thoughts, spoke tentatively at first. "I have to tell you about my scars, Kevin. I sustained these injuries after the cafeteria where I worked caught fire a few years back." She moved her hair aside and revealed the scars to me. There are more scars hidden under my clothes. I could see them well even in the faint moonlight, and I was on the verge of averting my eyes. A senior employee who attempted to shield me from the fire perished when the building fell. She removed me by using her body as a shield. Ashley talked about that moment while crying. She claimed that she was still having dreams about the fire, waking up from them, and finding it difficult to fall back asleep. I can still clearly recall the fire every time I look at my scars. I used to be scared that people would see them, but now I'm just happy to be here. I have to live fiercely in honor of the one who kept me safe from the flames. I haven't been thinking favorably about what happened until recently. I was at a loss for words. She was living so resolutely in spite of the adversity. When I was made fun of and teased for having a disability, I used to think badly of myself. Ashley, though, was making progress and doing her best to deal with reality. I blurted out, "Ashley, you're an amazing person, just like you were back then," out of nowhere. I was encouraged by your usual treatment of me in elementary school. I guess I still had a long way to go, but I thought I could pay you back today. Ashley started crying as soon as I said this. What have I done? I quickly extended a handkerchief to her. I apologize for crying unexpectedly. I make an effort to think optimistically, yet occasionally I wish I could revert to my previous state of mind. I was thrilled to hear that I had changed from you. Ashley answered, "Thank you," grinning despite her tears. Her face was as bright and happy as I remembered it to be, even though she was now at ease. Relieved, I thought back to my own experience of walking with a limp while wearing an orthotic device. During lunch breaks, Ashley would bring my school lunch and carry my textbooks. She would come play games with me inside, sometimes by herself, because I was unable to go outside and run about with other kids. It will surely get better. Even in my most jaded and cynical moments, Ashley was the only one who ever made comments like that about my leg. She gave me encouragement and informed me of the sites we could visit after my leg treatment was finished. Ashley was my constant source of support and encouragement. I wouldn't have been able to resist pessimism and have made it this far in life without her. It was my time now. Like she did for me years ago, I wanted to be the one to help Ashley. I had made up my mind. "Hey Ashley, how are you doing? Would you like to have dinner sometime? I truly hope to see you once more." I had never asked a woman out before, to be honest, but I had nothing to lose. I felt that it would be best to just tell her how I felt. "Are you certain you can go out with someone who has a lot of scars? Would you rather make a date with someone attractive?" Although her response might be interpreted as null, I found it to be more than sufficient. I said, "It's all right. I'm never alone anyhow," I said, displaying my lack of dating experience. Ashley laughed. I was happy to see Ashley laugh aloud for the first time in a long time. We began seeing each other more frequently after that. Unexpectedly, Ashley had also relocated to New York, where she was working and saving money for a procedure aimed at skin regeneration. Ashley brought us modest lunches to eat in the park on our outings. Even though we couldn't afford to travel to fancy places, I was glad to see Ashley's hardworking and modest side. We fell in love with one another right away and began dating. Although the reunion incident and the fact that we were from the same town contributed significantly, we never made the clear statement, "Let's be together," or made our sentiments known. Our time together became second nature to one another. I started to actively consider marriage, which is how I realized how our connection was developing. No matter what, I wanted to be with Ashley for the rest of my life. She always made my life happier with her brightness. Therefore, I wanted to be there for her. It also made more economical sense to live together than apart from each other. That's how I started to envision our future. Then it dawned on me that I hadn't even told her that I was in love with her. Though I'd never told Ashley outright, "I love you," I was very certain we were dating. I also wondered what Ashley thought of me. I felt so insecure all of a sudden. I didn't really know how to handle my feelings because this was my first relationship, but I needed to make sure Ashley and I were compatible. As usual, I was waiting for Ashley in the park one weekend. She seemed a little panicked, as though she believed she was running late. Ashley said, "Sorry I was late." I'd assured her that I had arrived early and she wasn't even late. "Hey, how about we take a trip somewhere else for once? Perhaps to a department shop or another location." "What?" Ashley was taken aback by my idea and responded, "But I made lunch for us." I opened my bag to show me the soft drinks and sandwiches in a plastic container. I proposed that we have lunch on the department store's rooftop. Ashley grew apprehensive as she noticed the strange mood and inquired, "What's going on? Why the abrupt alteration?" I took a long breath, scratched my head, and admitted, "I'd want to purchase you a ring. Although I have never gone to a jewelry store and don't even know what size ring to pick for you, it would seem good if I bent down and took out a ring. I'm sorry, it looks like everything is out of order, but I want to wed you, Ashley, immediately." I wish to purchase a ring for a proposal in the department shop. Ashley froze, mouth agape, then burst out laughing when I said what I intended to say. Even though I knew it was awkward and that she should have been laughing, I started to become irritated when I saw Ashley giggle through her tears. Just as I opened my mouth to say, "Stop laughing," I saw that Ashley was crying. She laughed and wept, saying, "Too late." I was momentarily confused as to what she was saying. "You already said I was your fiancé." Hearing such remarks made me immediately calm down and offer an apology. "Sorry to keep you waiting." Following that, we were formally married and moved in together. Now that we had greater stability in our income, I was able to obtain Ashley multiple procedures. The scars from her burns are significantly less visible now that she has endured the difficult treatments. She grinned and remarked, "Now I can finally wear a wedding dress." I'm grateful to have met Ashley every time I see her beaming smile. Emma, my ex-wife, was a fellow student. She insulted me and threw beer at me when she saw me at the reunion wearing my work clothes. I left the event because I could no longer stand her awful attitude, and as I did, a sleek, black, luxury car appeared in front of me, representing my prosperous life without her. Tom Harris is my name after we got divorced. I am an ordinary guy who was raised in an ordinary environment and has an unremarkable personality that you could find anywhere. I was raised in a typical family and have led a typical life. I made a good number of friends during my time in school, and I didn't have any really exciting experiences. The maxim that I, a regular guy, constantly remember is from my high school teacher, Mr. Johnson. Live with perseverance, and you can overcome any difficulty. This saying has always been there for me, encouraging me no matter what. Fortunately, I haven't yet been in a circumstance when I had to frantically rely on these words, but I always remember them. I was a boring student, but I had a secret admiration for my classmate Emma. I found her ever-changing expressions, her careful listening style, and her occasionally feminine side profile to be really alluring. I naively believed that our accidental meeting at the same university was fate. Even though I was such a quiet student, I've always secretly admired Emma. On the other hand, I was so unremarkable in the crowd that several of my peers didn't even recognize me. However, Emma would occasionally talk to me about our high school years, and those little exchanges brought me much joy. I was happy about such little things, and it was enough to keep me happy. I was a really humble man. Still, when I had my college degree, I was curious about my position. It was best to give up and move on since it had been a long-standing, unfulfilled love since high school. This was the opportunity. So, determined not to be rejected, I told Emma the truth. Her startling response, "Yes," made me question whether I was dreaming. I had genuinely enjoyed my days with Emma, whom I had always admired. I've always made an effort to give Emma anything she wants. I put a lot of effort into my job since I loved seeing her delighted grin after receiving my gifts. As our relationship developed amicably, I made Emma's dream of becoming a housewife come true by popping the question in my 3rd year as a working professional. I worked harder than ever, but taking care of 2 people's expenses was difficult. I worked so hard in my 3rd year because I wanted Emma to be happy. Fortunately, my hard work paid off, and I was able to advance in my career in a way that surprised both myself and my elders. I worked for a big company, so my pay was already above average, but after I got promoted, I began making an unbelievable amount of money. But while my salary rose, Emma's extravagant spending, all in the name of bettering herself, also increased. Even while it wasn't yet endangering our means of subsistence, buy new outfits and seasonal brand bags for each supper with friends added up. Whenever I felt like talking, I would hesitate to say anything because I knew she would be happy and would only have to put in more effort. I regret that my approach could have led her to become irresponsible in retrospect. I was talking to my coworker Susan while enjoying a coffee one day during our lunch break. Suddenly, on each employee's PC, there appeared an internal email. Susan was the first to view the email and mumbled, "No way," in shock. I saw some startling news on her screen. An enormous downsizing was announced as a result of subpar company performance. The names of individuals who will be let go were coldly published in the email. My name and Susan's came on the list of people being laid off, and I glanced through it nervously. I felt as though everything had darkened around me, and I almost dropped my coffee. All of the staff members on the list, including Susan and me, were independent contributors to the business in their early 30s. A few of us went up to President Smith to voice our objections. "We targeted you because you're young and have ample opportunity for re-employment," President Smith countered. "I apologize, but I ask that you respect our circumstances." He apologized profusely and in a kind manner, but his remarks were emotionless. He appeared to be merely apologizing to get out of the sticky position. To me, it felt like that only. We came to the conclusion that there was no point in disputing with President Smith and had to accept the layoff. "What will you do now?" Silently, Susan inquired. "I haven't made a decision yet. I should discuss it with my spouse." "Susan, how about you? What plans do you have?" "Well, packing up my personal items around my desk," I replied. She said, "I think I might go back to my parents' place." "I take it that your dad owns his own business. Thus, you'll have a backup plan for the time being." Using her best happy voice, she exclaimed, "Yay, that's right." I had no idea at the moment that Susan was about to cry in her voice. I wondered what I should do next as I drove home. I first considered how to tell Emma the news. I knew she would understand if I couldn't immediately find another job because I had worked so hard. Emma would undoubtedly encourage me. I could use my severance income to help with my job search. Feeling a little more positive, I accelerated my speed home, reassured by these thoughts. Emma exclaimed, "What?" as soon as I muttered about getting laid off when I arrived home. Not at all. I recognized her reaction as she turned pale. It's difficult, so feeling nervous was only normal. "But let's work through this together," I said. But before I could say anything further, Emma gave me a direct look and suggested that we get divorced. "What?" I was taken aback. "We ought to file for divorce if you are unable to get employment." A jobless man who is unable of spending money on me is useless. I don't require you, spit out Emma. Everything in front of my eyes turned dark. Emma barraged me with insults, and I was at a loss for words to respond. When I got married, I thought that because of your big company employment, we would be financially independent. My computations were incorrect. I could hear these words. Ultimately, Emma had never loved me at first. She knew I'd looked up to her since high school and figured that since I worked for a big firm, things will get stable financially someday. She believed that one day she would be able to achieve everything she wanted. I began to wonder if this was the intended meaning of left cooling. Even after a century, it seemed strange at the time, almost as if it were occurring to someone else. As I watched her lose her temper in front of me, I started to wonder if this was really the woman I had married. Feeling a mounting disgust as Emma went on to enumerate her complaints, I answered, "All right, let's get divorced." I was unable to move past my feelings or begin looking for a job until the divorce was finalized. After getting divorced, I started looking for a job seriously. Considering my smooth career up to that point, I knew it was a challenging employment market, but I hadn't anticipated it would be this difficult to get work. I'd initially searched for positions where I could apply the abilities I had acquired in my prior position, but nothing was available. Even with considerable savings, the need to find a new career quickly became pressing. I started looking for jobs in industries where I had no experience after realizing I couldn't be picky after my applications were turned down time and time again. Despite my belief that my physical strength was ordinary, I still avoided occupations requiring heavy labor because I didn't belong to an athletic club. I did, however, wind up doing some labor-intensive role interviews. Mr. Williams, the head of one company, was incredibly courteous. He paid close attention to my account of being let go. "Although it will be difficult at first, we will be there for you." He said, "Why don't you collaborate with us?" I was prepared to accept any job offer at that point. Since it was a construction company, there was some physical labor involved in the job, but mostly office work. No one made fun of me for being weaker or slower than others, and I appreciated everyone's encouragement. Although I wasn't returning the favor, I improved the company by making the most of my skills. That's how I earned Mr. Williams and my coworkers' trust. I feel quite lucky to have been hired by this organization. I was starting to feel at ease in my work when I got a notice about a high school reunion. An unpleasant memory came back. My former teacher, Mr. Johnson, was someone I wanted to see again, even though I didn't want to see Emma's face. I gave it some thinking and went to the reunion. As I was about to leave, I received an unforeseen call from work. I threw on my work clothes without thinking and made my way to the working site. It took longer than anticipated, and the reunion was well underway when I got there. I chose to wear my work clothes even though I had prepared a change of clothes. I recognized several people and went to hunt for Mr. Johnson, only to find out he was in the hospital. There's no reason to stay here if Mr. Johnson isn't here. Perhaps I should head out early, I considered. I heard a voice I didn't want to hear just then. "Sing. Tom, is that right?" It was Emma, who had turned into an even more flamboyant, or vulgar, person than she had been before. Standing next to her was Ethan, who was supposedly a fast-tracked elite. I could tell Emma was eyeing Ethan flirtatiously, and I knew he was her next target. It didn't appear to bother Ethan. Emma was decked out in designer labels, and Ethan, in his dapper suit, looked down at me, laughing heartily as he made fun of my outfit and work clothes. "What is the issue? Is that all you have to wear to a reunion this grand?" As one might anticipate from a man who was fired due to his incompetence, laughed Emma crudely. "Have some pride, Tom, please. Walking around like this, even if you're laid off, is just embarrassing to think we went to school with someone at rock bottom," smirking Ethan continued. Ethan and Emma were nodding along just like I had imagined. Emma spilled the beer she was carrying over my head all of a sudden. "You loser, that outfit fits you perfectly. she yelled. "Why don't you simply walk away?" As the two of them cast me in a demeaning light, Ethan exclaimed, "You're ruining the vibe here." They didn't even appear to be aware of how their actions surprised everyone in the vicinity. I think they thought my work clothes were too casual for me. I made the decision to go since I felt bad for them and didn't want to ruin the mood for anyone else. "I understand," I said. "I'll go," and made my way out the door. My surrounding students interrupted, saying, "You're not required to go. Considering how far you've come, you ought to remain longer. And put those two out of your mind." Standing in the middle of the arena, their arms crossed and smug smiles directed at me, I didn't want to spend any more time with those two. "I'll catch up with you guys later," I said to my companions as I opened the door to go. At that moment, a sophisticated black automobile arrived. There was a lot of commotion inside the restaurant as a fancy automobile pulled up outside. Naturally, eager to acquire the greatest angle of the car, Emma and Ethan navigated their way through the crowd. Emma was still calculating and wanted to know who owned the car. The driver then exited the vehicle and stated, "President Harris, your car is ready," in a kind manner. I could feel the air behind me getting cold. "President Harris," Emma's speech was hardly audible. I gave them both a quick glance before getting into the car, where Susan was already waiting. Making sure no one else could hear, I murmured, "Looks like Ethan's company is in trouble," into Emma's ear. "You should probably start looking for your new partner right away." Then I snuck past Emma, who was standing still, and entered the vehicle. "Hello. How was your day?" As I got into the car, Susan smiled to meet me. I said, sighing and letting my shoulders drop. "It was okay," I said. By pure happenstance, my new work ended up being at Susan's family's business, meaning that the thoughtful Mr. Williams who had been so encouraging was, in fact, Susan's father. I was promoted to vice president because he recognized my sincerity and hard work. I had told Susan that I was in love with her. Our shared background gave us ease and comfort, and before I knew it, we were a couple. More than anyone else, Mr. Williams was pleased for us. I was even making plans for Susan's wedding. Before long, I had come across Ethan's business through my professional interactions. Despite being a large corporation, there were ongoing suspicions of financial problems, and it appeared that an investigation would soon be launched. A company with that kind of reputation wasn't a good business partner, factual or not. It was evident that Ethan was entering uncharted territory. I walked into the room and saw Miss Smith sitting there, appearing a little anxious. "Please take a seat." As I took a seat across from her, I noticed that she didn't appear eager to talk. She probably finds it difficult to say no because she is too kind to let someone go easy. "I apologize for hiding my past from you. If anyone found out about my mafia past, I knew I would have to step down." "Oh, I see. Yes, I wanted to stick by your side and support someone who has such a great heart for other people. I am very grateful for what you have done. Hold on for a moment. I take it you called me in to fire me." No. You should also remain with me, I hope. But not both a driver and a CEO. Would you be interested in dating me with a view to marriage?" Miss Smith asked me, her voice quivering a little. Her face flushed red. "I would be honored if that were okay with you." I smiled in response, surprised by this unanticipated turn of events.
Live nearby, so I take James to their house often. They really like him, and whenever he visits, they go all out with meals. James and my dad get along great, and I thought everything would go smoothly when we got married. But James had always hesitated to introduce me to his parents. When I asked him why, he looked uncomfortable. "Could you wait a little longer? My parents aren't like yours." "I wish I had grown up with parents like yours," he said with a sad expression. I wondered if he had issues with his family, but I decided to give him time. I wasn't in a hurry to get married, so I figured it would be better for him to open up when he was ready. But things don't always go as planned. One holiday, James and I were on our way to our favorite restaurant when something unexpected happened. As the staff showed us to our table, James suddenly seemed nervous and fidgety. "What's wrong?" I asked, noticing how tense he was. He looked away, unsure how to explain, clearly struggling to find the words. I felt nervous at that moment, wondering if I had done something wrong. Just then, a woman in her 53s came over to our table and spoke to James cheerfully. "Oh, James, I haven't heard from you in a while. I was wondering what you were up to," she said. She then turned to look at me, her eyes narrowing as if she was judging me. She had downturned eyes that made it seem like she was glaring. Her hair was neatly tied back, which made her sharp eyes stand out even more. As I gave her a confused look, she let out a little laugh, but it wasn't friendly. "Are you really spending time with someone like her, James? You're such a good kid. If you don't like it, you need to tell her. Otherwise, girls like her won't get the message," she said. James's face tightened in anger. He glared at the woman and firmly said, "I won't allow you to insult her." But the woman gave me a cold look and said, "It's a shame my son has been tricked by a girl like you. Leave him alone right now." After that, she went to the cashier, paid her bill, and left the diner. "What just happened?" I asked, still in shock. James replied in a low voice, "That was my mother. A few years ago, because of her, I had to end a relationship with someone I was thinking of marrying. She didn't want to marry me because of my mom's behavior." I began to understand why she had acted that way. James continued, "If you choose to stay with me, there will be a lot of challenges. Maybe we should break up now. Don't worry, I'll keep things professional at work, and I'll make sure it doesn't cause you any trouble." He looked really upset, and it pained me to see him like that. But I calmly said, "I still want to be with you, James. Do you really want to end things with me?" James seemed surprised by my words. "You know what my mother is like. If you marry me, she will be a burden to you." "I don't mind. I think that's part of marriage, and we don't have to live with her, right? If it becomes an issue, I'll ask for a transfer at work, and we can move far away," I said. James stared at me, deeply considering my words, and I gave him a reassuring smile. "Then I feel better about it. Is it strange if I propose to you right now?" he asked. A wave of warmth rushed through me, and I could feel my face turning red. "Are you serious?" I asked, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Yes, of course. I want to spend my life with you," I said, my cheeks growing hotter. "I feel a bit like you've beat me to it, but I'm really happy. I want to be with you forever," James said with a smile, and I finally felt relieved. After that, we decided to tell my parents about our engagement. They were thrilled and asked how we decided to get married. I knew we'd have to mention James's mom at some point, but we tried to avoid the topic by pretending to be shy. However, my mother wouldn't let it go. "So, have you already met James's parents, or is that still in the works?" she asked. James and I were caught off guard. "No, I don't plan to tell my parents about the wedding," James said, causing my mom to gasp in surprise. "Why not?" she asked, shocked. "Because I know they won't approve of our marriage," James explained. At that point, my father gave us a serious look. "That's not acceptable. Marriage is the joining of two families. Your mother would be heartbroken if she found out you got married without her knowing. You both should at least meet with them once. If they still refuse, come talk to us and we'll support you." My dad's words were strong and comforting, but James still looked worried. "I'm fine," I said with a smile, hoping to put him at ease. I thought that if we couldn't get past this challenge, we wouldn't be able to find real happiness together. Later, James told his parents that I would be coming to introduce myself. They didn't seem excited, but he was able to set up the meeting anyway. James's father was a CEO, and they lived in a big house with a large yard. When I stepped in, a big dog started barking. James smiled and petted the dog's chin, calming him down, and then the dog let me pet him too. While we were playing with the dog, the front door opened and his parents came out. His mother had a sharp look that made her seem intimidating, and his father looked just as stern as he stared down at me. "Don't touch our dog. You're disgusting," were the first words his father said to me, without even a hello. He started scolding me right away, and I felt really uncomfortable. "How dare you talk to her like that?" If you keep acting like this, I won't hesitate to cut ties with you, James said firmly. His parents gave me angry looks but didn't say anything else unpleasant after that. They invited us into the house. As we walked in, I found it a little strange. Looking at James's face, you'd think he's a kind person because of his gentle eyes, but he didn't look anything like his father. His mother had upturned eyes, but he didn't take after her either. Sometimes traits skip a generation, or kids don't look like their parents at all, so I decided not to think too much about it. Once inside, as I was looking around, a middle-aged man in a suit appeared. Mr. Eric. Welcome home, young master, he said, bowing to greet James. He had a kind smile that was contagious, and I couldn't help but smile back. It's been a while, Mr. Eric, James said. You've grown up so much, young master, Mr. Eric replied, smiling warmly at James. It was the first time I saw James truly smile since we arrived. Then James introduced me to him. This is Mr. Eric, my father's right-hand man. Honestly, he's more like a father to me than my real dad. My father never paid much attention to me, so Mr. Eric was the one who took care of me. You're the boss's son. I was just doing my job, Mr. Eric said modestly. But you've always had a soft spot for me, haven't you? James added with a smile. I like you more than my father. James joked with a chuckle, his laugh making me smile for the first time in what felt like forever. As we were talking, his mother suddenly stormed in from the back of the house. Cheryl, what do you think you're doing? Get over here now, she yelled angrily. She shot a harsh look at Mr. Eric. What are you doing here, slacking off? How many times have I told you to stay away from Cheryl? I'll make sure my husband knows about this. Now, get back to work. Mr. Eric nodded and replied, I understand. I'll do as you say. He then left the room. I couldn't help but wonder if being the CEO's secretary meant you had to deal with orders from the wife at home, too. James glared at his mother and spoke up. Why do you always treat Mr. Eric so poorly? How can you be so rude to someone who's worked so hard for Dad? Quiet. You should just listen to your parents. I'll handle that man. Now, both of you, come over here. We followed her to the living room, where James and I sat on the sofa across from his parents. His mother was the first to speak. Thanks for wasting our time today. I understand you're here to get our blessing, but we don't approve of this marriage. Just give up and go home, she said coldly. I was ready for the rude comments, so they didn't bother me as much as they could have. I calmly responded, No, thank you for making time to meet with us. James and I love each other, and it's natural for two people in love to get married, don't you think, father, mother? I smiled politely, but my mother-in-law let out an exaggerated sigh. You really don't understand marriage, do you? She said with a mocking tone. Since our last meeting, I've looked into you. You're a very average woman graduated from an ordinary school, working at a small company. Despite having no real skills, you've managed to trap my James, haven't you? Do you really think someone like you is a good match for our family? In marriage, what matters is a good match. Mom, James interrupted, Cheryl and I work at the same company, doing the same job. If you think she's not good enough, then neither am I. We are a perfect match. You're different, James, his mother snapped back. There must be a reason you chose that company, but this woman didn't have any other choice. And, she added with a smirk, turning her sharp gaze toward me, it seems like you come from a poor family. After our money, are you? My blood boiled at my mother-in-law's comments. I had promised myself I wouldn't let anything she said get to me, but when she insulted my parents, I couldn't hold back. I snapped, Don't assume we're poor. Oh, what's wrong with telling the truth? She sneered. You live in an old, rundown house that's over 53 years old and drive a car from a decade ago. Did I strike a nerve? I'm just saying what's obvious. This is why I can't stand poor people. My family home was built by my great-grandfather, a carpenter. It's special to us. And as for the car, we like it and take good care of it. That doesn't make us poor. You did your research, right? So, you must know what my parents do for a living. I responded, trying to stay calm. Yes, I know. Your father is a university professor, and your mother is a high school teacher. They have respectable jobs, but there's still a big difference between our families, she replied. James is going to take over his father's business one day. Don't think for a second that the daughter of mere educators is good enough to marry my son." She laughed loudly, clearly enjoying herself. Just then, James stood up. His face, normally gentle, had turned into something I had never seen before, cold and furious. "This is pointless. I'm cutting ties with you. I can't forgive you for insulting someone I care about. Cheryl, let's go." "There's no reason to stay here anymore," he said, grabbing my hand as we left the house. "I'm sorry," he said quietly as we walked away. "I'll explain everything to your parents. Please don't say you won't marry me." I nodded, unable to speak. We went straight to my parents' house and told them what had happened. James had anticipated something like this might happen, so he had brought a voice recorder. Everything his mother said was recorded. After listening, my parents thought for a moment and then spoke. "Yes, the way his mother talked was awful, but you two are giving up too easily. We'll help you come up with a plan, so keep preparing for the wedding," my father said. "If you've both decided to marry, you don't need their approval. But it would still be better if you could get James's parents' blessing," my mother added calmly. Hearing their words gave us hope, and we nodded in agreement. We decided to leave the situation with James's parents to my family and focus on planning our future together. 2 months later, my parents called us and James and I visited my family home. When we arrived, we saw James's parents and Mr. Eric sitting around a small table. As we joined them, the room felt a bit crowded. I thought James's parents might make rude comments again, but they stayed quiet. My father was the one who filled us in on what had been discussed while we were away. James's parents looked into our family, so we decided to do some investigating as well. My father began. His parents married 32 years ago after his mother became pregnant. At that time, his father had just started his company. Mr. Eric, who was an ordinary employee back then, supported his father with dedication. As my father continued, James interrupted. "That's all well known in our family. Mr. Eric started as a regular employee but was promoted to my father's personal assistant because of his hard work. My mother mostly raised me on her own while my father struggled to manage the company. It seems Mr. Eric supported not just my dad but my mom, too." My father nodded, acknowledging James's words. Then he said, "Mr. Eric did indeed support your family with great dedication. Now, let me shift the conversation a bit. I'm a genetic researcher at the university. Genetically, children inherit half of their DNA from each parent. Even if a child looks very different from their parents, they still receive half of their genes from each one." James gave my father a puzzled look, and I was also confused about where he was going with this. My usually calm father had a serious expression as he addressed James's parents. "Please listen carefully. I hired a detective to conduct a background check on your family. Your father works hard, and Mr. Eric has always been there to help. Your mother is fully devoted to housework. It's quite admirable. But when I looked at your family photos, something didn't add up. Neither of your parents have a widow's peak, but you, James, do. This trait is dominant, meaning a child with a widow's peak can only inherit it from a parent who also has one. And don't you think James looks quite a bit like Mr. Eric? Especially with the drooping eyes and widow's peak? That's why I called your parents here today to discuss this." As my father finished explaining, James looked at his parents and Mr. Eric in shock, unsure of what to say. "I am a French teacher, just like my mother, and I'm good at French. I never noticed anything different about their foreheads, and even if I did, I'm no expert in genetics." After a long silence, James's father finally spoke. 40 years ago, I was so focused on my work that I neglected my family completely. Then my wife told me she was pregnant. What she didn't know was that I had been hiding my infertility from her. When I found out about her affair, I was furious, and she was just as angry at me for keeping my infertility a secret. After a huge argument, I told her that if I raised her child as my own, I would forgive her. In return, she promised to forgive me for hiding the truth. I made Mr. Eric my personal assistant to keep him close, hoping to stop any further affair between them. After spilling everything, James's father sat there, looking empty, as if all the life had drained from him. Meanwhile, James's mother started to cry. "I loved Mr. Eric. I wanted to raise James with him," she sobbed. James is a precious child I had with the man I truly loved. I can't let him marry someone I don't even know. I absolutely won't allow this marriage." As she wiped her tears and glared at me, James gave her a cold, disgusted look. "I've always known, Dad, that you never truly loved me, and I've felt Mom's strange obsession with me for years. I even wish sometimes that Mr. Eric was my real father. But now, hearing all of this, you three are disgusting. Mom, I don't want to see you as my parents anymore. Even if Mr. Eric is my biological father, I won't acknowledge him either. I won't forgive any of you. I'm cutting ties with all of you and marrying into Cheryl's family," James said firmly. At his words, his mother jumped up, clinging to him, crying. "No, James, you can't. You're mine. I won't let you go, especially not to some common girl. We can live together. I'll allow your marriage, but don't say you're leaving us." As she grabbed onto James's arm, I swatted her hand away. "Ma'am, please stop. James is clearly uncomfortable. Do you even realize how much pain you've caused him? Probably not, because all you care about is yourself. If you had just betrayed your husband to be with Mr. Eric, that's one thing, but you've continued to deceive James and hurt him for years. I didn't want to say anything at first, because it's a matter between you three, but I can't just sit here and let you ruin James's happiness. Why don't you put his happiness first? If you don't like me, that's fine, but if you're only trying to control him, you're failing as a mother. From now on, I'll make James happy, so please don't stand in our way." After I said that, his mother started crying again, calling me cruel, but Mr. Eric was there to comfort her. We decided to talk about the future later. A few days later, James's parents officially apologized to us and my parents. They finally accepted our marriage, and James and I turned in our marriage certificate. James moved into my house, and we started our life together. In the end, James's father couldn't forgive his wife's affair. Even though it was too late to ask for compensation, they divorced and split their assets. Mr. Eric also resigned and moved far away with James's mother. Her luxurious life came to an end, and she was forced to live the kind of life she always looked down on. She sometimes sends letters asking James for money, but he ignores them. He has cut all ties with his father since they aren't biologically related, and he has no intention of becoming Mr. Eric's adopted son. Legally, he's still his father's son, but they seem to have accepted that. After Mr. Eric resigned and James's mother was no longer around to support him, the performance of James's father's company dropped. He stepped down, and no one knows where he went after that. A year after marrying James, I noticed that his parent house was up for sale. We had a small wedding ceremony, given the complicated family issues, and only invited close family and relatives. Even so, it was a special day, and I was happy with how it turned out. Now, we have been blessed with a beautiful daughter, and I've quit my job to focus on raising her. My parents visit occasionally to help take care of her, which is a big help. James and I are committed to supporting each other and raising our daughter with love. On the morning of the 22th, the company president called me into his office and abruptly told me, "You're fired. Today is your last day." I was speechless. The timing couldn't have been worse. It was the day we had to pay our suppliers. Normally, we made bank transfers for the long-term suppliers, but I also handled some of the payments personally by visiting them. Still in shock, I stood there as he added, "You seem like you're ready to go home. I'm giving you the rest of the day off, just for you. Leave quickly." Before I could say a word, he pushed me out of the office, and the door slammed shut behind me. I was stunned, unsure of how to respond or even where to start. My name is Ember. I joined this small, family-run paving company right after finishing high school, and for the past 12 years, I've been working in clerical roles. Until today, that is. We had about 22 employees, and for most of my time here, things were really good. When the current chairman was still the president, the company felt like a second home. It was a comfortable place to work. The chairman, now retired, was deeply involved with the younger staff, and his wife, Delaney, would often come in to help with various tasks. That was before he got sick and had to step away. Their daughter, Sienna, was very skilled in both the field and office work, and her husband was the site manager. The workers trusted him, and even though Sienna and her husband were part of the founding family, they were always down to earth and respectful. They treated everyone like equals. If only things had stayed that way, life would have been perfect. But reality doesn't always follow our wishes. Late last year, during a routine company health screening, the chairman was diagnosed with cancer. He decided it was time to step down and focus on his health, and he appointed Sienna's husband, the site manager, as the next president. Everyone agreed it was the best decision. We all wanted the chairman to concentrate on his treatment and hoped for his full recovery. However, something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, the chairman's oldest son, Merrick, showed up with his family. No one had seen him in years, and many of us didn't even know he existed. It turns out Merrick had been disowned by his parents about 32 years ago, and his name had never come up at work. From what the older employees told me, Merrick had been a troublemaker when he was younger. He was frequently in trouble with the law, and each time he got arrested or caused problems, his parents would have to apologize on his behalf. After dropping out of high school, he got involved in shady businesses like multi-level marketing and scams. That's when the chairman finally had enough and cut ties with him. Despite being out of their lives for decades, Merrick showed up one day, begging for forgiveness. "Dad, I've changed. Please give me another chance," he said. It was quite a scene, as our office is small and the president's office is right next to the clerical room where I work. I overheard everything. Merrick pleaded to be allowed to work at the company, but after everything I'd heard about him, I wasn't sure if he had really changed. Still, the chairman was insistent. "I apologize to everyone," he said, addressing the staff. "But I ask you to give Merrick another chance." Sienna and the older employees, who knew about Merrick's troubled past, weren't exactly thrilled, but they didn't want to go against the chairman's heartfelt request. So, Merrick and his family moved into the annex at the chairman's house. Merrick started working at the company, and his wife took over household duties for the chairman and Delaney. Their daughter, who seemed to be a college student, visited the company only once. The chairman believed that Merrick had faced enough struggles in life to have turned over a new leaf, and Delaney was delighted to have him back in the family. She kept talking about how they were all going to rebuild the company together. But soon after, Merrick made a bold and divisive statement. "I'm the eldest son, so I should be the next president," he declared. This created immediate tension between him, Sienna, and her husband. Though Merrick acted like he was working hard in front of the chairman, it became clear to the rest of us that he was doing next to nothing. He frequently made belittling comments, saying things like, "Physical labor is for the workers. You're all just worker ants. Keep your heads down and get on with it." Naturally, this attitude made him deeply unpopular with the staff. Some of the younger employees even approached the chairman directly, saying, "We can't work in these conditions." Despite the complaints, both the chairman and Delaney tried to smooth things over, pleading with the staff to be patient. "We'll talk to Merrick," they promised. "Please try to understand the bigger picture." But their efforts weren't enough. 3 months ago, the chairman's cancer worsened, and he had to be hospitalized. At that point, Merrick made another bold move. "I am the president now," he announced, even though most of us still believed Sienna's husband was supposed to take over. While some employees tried to convince the chairman and Delaney to stick to their original plan, they ultimately sided with Merrick, their biological son. This decision stirred up resentment among the staff, many of whom felt that parental love had clouded their judgment. The once pleasant and cooperative atmosphere at the company started to shift. Sienna and her husband took on more responsibility behind the scenes, trying to keep things running smoothly, while I was left to handle all the administrative tasks on my own. Where I once shared the workload with Delaney and Sienna, now I often found myself working late into the night, sometimes not leaving the office until after midnight. Meanwhile, Merrick showed little interest in the administrative side of things. He spent his days at bars, betting on horses, and gambling. The final straw for me came over an issue with company expenses. Merrick had been using the company's credit card for personal expenses, and I had looked the other way for a while. But one day, the charge was too much to ignore. With a heavy heart, I handed the receipt back to him. "I can't approve this," I said. "Why not?" he demanded. "This is for your wife's corrective underwear," I explained. It's not a business expense, so I can't approve it. His face turned red with anger. Don't argue with me, he snapped. She's the president's wife. It's only right that she dresses well. This is a legitimate business expense. But I stood my ground. No, that's not how it works, I replied. Your wife's underwear can't be expensed as a business cost. I stammered, trying to wrap my head around how the president could justify spending $8,000 on his wife's corrective underwear, and what he said next left me even more baffled. Then let's make selling corrective underwear our new business venture. We'll categorize it as inventory so it counts as an expense, he suggested, grinning as if he had come up with a brilliant idea. I was completely at a loss for words. We're a paving company, I managed to say, trying to reason with him. So what? We can just threaten clients. If they don't buy from us, we'll cancel their contracts. Everyone will buy. It's easy money, he said, laughing at his own absurd idea. $44,000 for one, $8,000 for a set. His laughter echoed in the office, but all I felt was horror. That's completely unethical. It'll destroy our company's credibility, I snapped, no longer able to hide my frustration. From that moment, I became the president's main target. Day after day, I endured his belittling comments and condescending attitude. He would find any excuse to criticize my work, making every day more unbearable. There were many times I wanted to quit, but my loyalty to the chairman, who had always treated me kindly, and my concern for my colleagues kept me hanging on. I knew the team would struggle if I left suddenly, and to be honest, I couldn't afford to be without a job overnight. So, I decided to tough it out, waiting for the right moment to move on. Little did I know, that decision would soon be taken out of my hands. When I was unexpectedly fired, I knew it would cause chaos for our clients if I just walked away. Taking a deep breath, I mustered the courage to confront the president. I can't do this. I can't leave without proper notice or a handover. Even your daughter won't be able to handle all the work alone. And today is the day we need to make payments, I said, speaking as quickly as possible before he could interrupt. Just as I expected, his face turned bright red with anger. Shut up. I told you to resign because my daughter is joining the company. Today is your last day. As for the payments, let them wait until they come to collect it. There's no need to pay up front. His tone was dismissive, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Isn't it normal to pay for something once you buy it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I explained the situation as clearly as possible, as if I were speaking to a child. But his response was so irrational, I started questioning if he was thinking clearly at all. If that's the case, just threaten to switch suppliers, he sneered. Tell them we won't pay this time, so they should give it to us for free. I was stunned. How could he not see how wrong this was? You're completely useless, he spat at me. My daughter has a college degree. She can handle the office work just fine. As family, she won't question my expenses like you do. You're all talk and no action. We don't need someone like you. Leave now. It was obvious now. He wanted his daughter to take over so he could continue abusing the company's funds for personal use without being questioned. Well, if that's how you feel, I won't regret leaving, I said, my voice calm but tired. There was no point in arguing any further. My patience had worn thin. I quickly gathered my belongings, left the office, and felt a pang of guilt for the clients I was leaving behind. Before I fully walked away, I decided to call Sienna. Even though I knew she and Delaney were occupied with the chairman's health, I felt this situation was urgent. I explained everything to Sienna, hoping she could manage the mess I was leaving behind. After leaving the company, I found myself suddenly with nothing to do. Being fired without notice clearly violated labor laws, and I knew that if I reported this to the Labor Standards Office, the company would be in big trouble. Since the company was part of a middle-market payment system, I could claim severance pay and a month's salary through government support. There was no rush. I had up to 5 years to apply, and the Labor Standards Office had a 2-year statute of limitations on filing complaints. With my professional mindset, I immediately started planning the necessary steps for my exit and retirement. After working overtime and weekends for so long, I finally had some time to myself. I decided to take it easy for a week and planned a refreshing day trip to the beach to clear my head. After enjoying a peaceful day by the ocean, I checked my phone and saw several missed calls, emails, and voicemails. Sienna's email caught my eye. It read, "The payment process went smoothly. Everything is in order." I felt a wave of relief. Even though my departure had been sudden and ugly, at least the payments had been handled. Next, I listened to a voicemail from the company. It was the president. His voice panicked. "Hey, what's going on? They're saying I'm not the real president. Did you know about this? Explain yourself." I chuckled at his confusion and continued scrolling through my messages. Among them was a message from the chairman himself, asking me to come to the hospital. Without hesitation, I made my way there. When I arrived at the hospital that evening, I found Delaney, Sienna, and the president already there. The chairman, lying in his bed, greeted me with a weary smile. "Ember, I'm truly sorry for my foolish son," he said softly. "What's going on? Why are they saying I'm not the president?" Merrick demanded arrogantly, clearly still unaware of the situation. The chairman quickly shut him down. "Be quiet," he ordered sternly. It turned out that right after I called Sienna, she immediately informed the chairman and Delaney. As soon as the chairman heard the news, he reached out to Merrick, who had been acting as the company's president, and asked him, "Do you really not know what's going on?" The truth was finally coming to light. I explained calmly, "Merrick, you never had any legal authority. Your title as president was just that, a title. In business, the president's role is a position within the company, but it's the representative director who holds the legal responsibility for the company's actions." Merrick stood there, dumbfounded, as the reality of the situation sank in. Externally, the role of a representative director is much more formal and requires specific legal steps to change. While we could change the title of president informally within the company, altering the legal status of the representative director is a complex process. That's why, despite Merrick's position as president, he never had the legal authority he thought he did. When Merrick was made president 3 months ago, there was strong opposition from Sienna, the site manager, and other veteran employees. That's when I came up with a plan. Merrick could serve as a figurehead president, while the chairman would remain the legally responsible representative director. I knew the ins and outs of company law, and I suggested that if Merrick proved himself worthy and earned the respect of the staff, we could then begin the legal process to formalize his role as president. But if Merrick failed, we could either remove him or consider closing the company altogether while Sienna and the site manager prepared to launch a new venture. Sienna was skeptical that Merrick could ever change, but the chairman and Delaney continued to believe in him, at least until Merrick unfairly fired me, which seemed to open their eyes to his flaws. "You've always needed to understand the importance of caring for your employees if you want to be a leader," the chairman said, repeating advice he had given Merrick countless times. Merrick, however, remained defiant. "Can't we just take care of the procedures now?" he asked, as if it were a simple fix. "No, it's not that easy," the chairman explained. "Our company offers shares to employees who want them. Many employees own stock, including Ember, who holds 10%. She's a major shareholder. We can't ignore her opinion, and the other shareholders won't support you either." As the president began to grasp the seriousness of the situation, his face went pale.
"What?"
"I don't have any shares. I was planning to pass my shares to you once you'd proven yourself as a capable president," the chairman said, his voice filled with disappointment. "Were you only interested in my wealth, thinking I wouldn't be around much longer?" He slumped in despair, while Merrick stood silently, visibly upset. Still, Merrick refused to back down. "I'm the eldest son. What's wrong with taking what's rightfully mine? The company belongs to me," he argued, clearly unable to see past his sense of entitlement. "I can't forgive you any longer," the chairman responded, his tone firm and final. "As the representative director, I bear full responsibility for this company, and as a shareholder, I have the right to call for a meeting to propose your removal." I supported the chairman's decision, stating firmly, "Mr. President, Ember is right. No one will support you now." For the first time, Merrick realized just how deep the trouble ran. "You mean I could actually be fired?" His voice wavered with disbelief. You were just a clerk before, the chairman reminded him. Ember was the only one who gave you a chance, and now you've lost even that. Delaney, who had stayed silent during most of the exchange, finally spoke up. Ember, I owe you a sincere apology, she said, turning toward me. I regret the trouble I caused by letting my love for my son cloud my judgment. Please tell me what you want to do next. Without hesitation, I addressed Merrick directly. Mr. President, I no longer wish to work under your leadership, so I am resigning effective immediately. However, I expect to receive my severance pay along with 1 month's salary, including unpaid overtime and holiday pay. As a shareholder, I will also take action through the Labor Standards Office to remove anyone who is harmful to the company. The color drained from Merrick's face completely as he realized the gravity of the situation. I continued, explaining how Sienna had been working behind the scenes, visiting clients, and successfully promoting the new company. Most of our clients had already decided to switch to the new venture, and many employees were planning to follow suit. That's impossible, Merrick shouted, his voice breaking. I'll sue you. Before he could continue, the chairman intervened once again, speaking calmly but decisively. You don't have the authority to do that, Merrick. I am the representative director here, not you. Merrick collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of his mistakes. A mixture of regret, disappointment, and finality filled the room. It's unfortunate that it had to end this way, Mr. President, I said, my voice steady. If you had taken the opportunity to change your approach when you returned, things could have been different. You had many chances to learn, but in the end, you squandered them. This is simply the consequence of your actions. In the aftermath, the chairman decided to close down the company entirely, leaving Merrick unemployed. As for Merrick's wife, she tried to pursue her idea of selling corrective underwear, but the business failed miserably. Their aggressive sales tactics got them into legal trouble, and both were eventually arrested for their involvement in a pyramid scheme. When Sienna returned to her parents' home, she found boxes of unsold underwear, a sad reminder of their failed venture. As for their daughter, she found a job elsewhere, though I never heard much more about her after that. As for me, I found happiness working at Sienna and the site manager's new company. Surrounded by people I trust and care about, I now live my life with authenticity and purpose, cherishing the relationships that truly matter.